Welcome back to the podcast with your host, Samantha.
And I'm Alexa. We're here to light up your life.
Today, we're joined by Benny Salas. He's an international executive coach, speaker, and founder of That Coaching Guy, Inc. With nearly 30 years of experience, Benny has helped leaders and entrepreneurs refine their message, grow their influence, and lead with confidence.
Benny, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this. So always love being on podcast and having great conversations. This should be fun.
I'll kick us off. So, what is the first thing that inspired you to get into professional speaking and coaching?
Oh, that's interesting. So I grew up in the performing arts, right? So I got very comfortable with the stage probably around the age of like 12 or 11. Got really comfortable. It was a performing arts program in the inner city of Chicago where I grew up. It was meant to keep kids off streets and, getting into trouble. And it put me in performing arts and dance. And I was like, what am I even doing here? I was a skateboarder. I was a basketball player. That was my thing. And before you know it, I actually was really good at performing arts, which kind of led me into my high school, which I became a performing arts major. And so I majored different dance arts and hip hop, modern jazz, Spanish dance. And then that was like kind of like that first entry point into like any kind of stage or in front of an audience. And then at 19, I did my first speaking opportunity. And then I knew from there, it was like, it's what God was calling me to do. And so it felt like at that point, like everything, like I always joke around, like I sucked as an employee, but I was a great communicator. Like that was like the number one thing. As long as I was speaking, leading, influencing, I was great at my job. Other than that, just wasn't for me. And so that kind of was an evolution of like 29 years as a speaker. I would say every year, my ability to speak in front of larger audiences, the most I've ever spoken in front of was 2,500. I started to do it as a national speaker in the schools, helping faith-based organizations. And so that was kind of like how that got kicked off very early on. And that kind of led me into what I do now with organizational leadership and development. And then I found coaching as the easiest way to actually help leaders and business owners grow, was actually coach them professionally. And so I got introduced to that through United Way when I became a financial coach. And like anything else I do, I believe heavily in personal mastery. And so I went to school for coaching. Got two certifications in coaching. One was at a master's level in coaching. And there is a thing called the International Coaching Federation that actually accreditates accredited schools where you get accredited and you go through the whole process of submitting all your hours and everything. So I did that in 2015. And that's when I really, started to lean into this. And then I brought the two together um, and started to build programs to help people speak more and, grow their communication and become better listeners and better leaders. And the rest is history. And then I'm on your podcast and then, and then we're going to go viral, like, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there
Speak
you
that
go.
into existence. But
Let's go.
I think it's a blessing that you were introduced at such a young age speaking on stages because I know for me, I didn't have that experience. And I know public speaking has been terrifying for me. So that's one of the reasons why we started the podcast. But I think that's really cool. I had no idea that you were a dancer either.
Yeah, it started off with that, and it's so interesting because my son, he's doing a TEDx talk. He's doing
Oh,
TEDx Youth. He's 12 years old. He's gonna be 12. He's 11
wow.
right now,
That's
and so he's gonna be 12 years
amazing.
old. So if you look at my latest Instagram post, you'll see my son. It's November 1st. He'll be doing a TEDx talk in Miramar, Florida, and so he's. I told him, I'm like, dude, you're like 7 years ahead of me. So
Oh,
you're gonna be a beast when you get older, if that's what he wants to do, but
hmm.
I know there's so many people who think their confidence is really built through speaking, being confident in front of people. And, I feel like that skill set, no matter whatever job or career you're in, it's gonna take you far. So
Yeah, absolutely. Communication is so critical. And I think it was the same for me. I came over to the US and I didn't speak English. It wasn't my first language. And I just remember being terrified in class when you would get called on to read a certain part of the book. And I would try to count which part is going to be my part so I can read it over 10 times, not to make any mistake when it came to be my turn. And I just remember being terrified anytime that I had to speak up because I was so afraid, that time that I was going to get made fun of for having an accent or saying a word incorrectly. And it was terrifying. So the fact that you can go ahead and do this for your son and get him acclimated and doing that way sooner, he's going to be so ahead. So great.
Yeah, I think maybe now I think yesterday was interesting. He had a coaching session with his coach and we went over his outline and afterwards I looked at him and he cried. He just looked at me and he cried. And he said, "I feel the pressure." And I said, there's a lot I can do as your father to tell you what I do to avoid the pressure and get around it. I said, but the truth is, he looked at me, he goes, I guess I just have to go through it and figure out myself. I said, yeah, you do. I said, you
Mhm.
got to learn how to handle the pressure. You got to learn how when it's your time. There's only so like I will only be there for so many things, but the truth is that you'll have to take advantage of these moments. And I just listened to him and wanted him to know, like I need this to come from him. As much as I want it for him, I can't want it more for him. He's got to want to do this himself. He's got to want to see himself, and he does. The good thing is that he does. He told me and my wife how he felt, and it was a good moment for me because I think we could, like, again, in sports, like if you ever, if you have kids, but in sports, I want this for my son to be a great basketball player. But the truth is that he's gotta go out there and be great. He's gotta choose it. He's gotta make decisions like, you keep turning the ball over. I don't care how good you think you were. You're turning the ball over. We're not scoring. So I think that's his mindset now. And so he's got a really good message that he's going to be sharing around basketball, around mindset, around winning. And for a 12-year-old to make those connections to me is very powerful. It's not easy to do. So it
And
should
so
be
I'm
fun.
curious to know for our audience, what are some of the skill sets that you're teaching your son to do a really incredible job on the TEDx stage?
Yeah, I'm trying to get him to see, one, he has a coach as well. So he's got like two coaches really, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
but I think, one is to look in the mirror, right? I heard this saying this past week that leaders don't just look through the magnifying glass, they look in the mirror. Sometimes we want to do that. We want to examine everybody else instead of examining ourselves. And so what I want him to do is I want him to see himself in that space. I want him to see that he has a message. Even at age 12, he's got a message. You know what I mean? I had a message at age 9. You know, Many of us have a message when we're kids, but nobody gives us the stage to say it. No one gives us the space to cultivate it and mature the message, right? Like all of us have that. So I think for him is being comfortable with who he is. Like what's the message? What's the value that the world needs to hear from an 11-year-old? And first of all, to even think that you even have something to say is one conversation, right? The second thing is to actually deliver it. And so, the fact is, my wife, she's a therapist, and so one thing that we do is we teach our kids to be able to speak up, share how they feel. I think as kids, sometimes, and maybe it was just in my household. I'll speak for my household, okay? In my household, sometimes they didn't give us the place to speak. Sometimes it was just kind of be quiet or speak when you're spoken to, or you weren't given that place. And in our household, it's different. We want our kids to speak up. We want them to build their confidence. They may be dead wrong, okay, but they're going to speak up. And so I'd rather them be wrong and us be correct than us try to be right and shut them down you know? And so for me, it's about helping him see that part in himself, like I said, kind of looking in the mirror and just knowing that he doesn't have to be perfect, but he resembles a lot of my traits. I'm a perfectionist, which to me is like the death of me, right? So something like if you ever want to see me like go down in flames, just have me do a website. Like that would just put me like I'm like, you know what I mean? Like it's like because I'm so like it's got to be like this, and it just drives me crazy. And one thing I noticed about my son is he has those tendencies where he gets down on himself before he even starts. And, I look at that, and that's a lot of my clients. A lot of my clients have already talked themselves out of it. So they never share their message. They never take a stage. They never impact the world, because the truth is that you don't have a problem speaking to people. You really have a problem with how you speak to yourself and how you've stepped. So I have a saying that says people don't fear public speaking, they fear the public speaking. And the
Yeah.
biggest fear that we have isn't what we're going to say. The biggest fear that we have is what other people are going to say about us. And so often we could just run that script in our head and exhaust ourselves to a point when we're not motivated. So the truth is that when you ask me to do something, I'm not motivated, because for so long I've said no to me. For so long, I've not stepped up. And so I want to help him see his potential. I want to help him build that confidence. And he knows at the end of the day, this is about being confident. And what do you do to build that, right? So I think that's the one thing I'm trying to help him see, is confidence. Like, because if you know what you want to say, it's just being confident to deliver it. 'Cause you know what you want to say. So then why don't we say it, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's so much about the message, right? I think to your point, it's not how the audience is going to interpret you. You really should be removing the ego. If you focus on the message, and just remove yourself completely, and not have those thoughts. What are the people going to think about me if I'm going to mess up? Am I going to say something wrong and they're going to think I'm an idiot, right? I think I have those thoughts in my mind. I can only imagine what a 12-year-old is going to think. So definitely, to remove your ego, think about what message you want to get across and focus on that, because I think that would make it simpler. But the other point I wanted to make, you have to go out there, you have to put yourself through it, because otherwise, without that practice, without getting outside of your comfort zone, how are you going to build confidence? It's about pushing through, about doing it. And the more times that you do it, each time you're going to get a little bit more comfortable being on stage. You're speaking to a larger group every single time that you put yourself out there. And you're just going to do that much better.
100%. Yeah, it is. It's about, at the end of the day, and this goes for any speaker, not just a 12-year-old, right? Like you got to do reps. I think
Mhm.
people in their head, in their head, they're the greatest thing ever, right? In their head. And so it's one thing what's in your head and what's in your heart, right? And so the question is, do you have the heart to go out there and say it, right? Or is it only living in here?
Mhm.
And so I think that's where, like, it was so interesting as I was talking to him yesterday. There was a moment as I was listening, I was sitting over here and my son was sitting like this, like how we're sitting, and the coach was on the other side of the screen, and I could see his face. And I was like, been there, been there, like, and I told him, I said, every time I speak, I speak, both as a paid and non-paid speaker, virtually, in person. And I said to him, I said, I know that feeling. I said, I don't feel that anymore, but I know that feeling, and that feeling of
Mm.
knowing, that there's pressure on you. And he goes, yeah, yeah. And one of his talking points is how to handle pressure, right? Because one of his basketball teams, he was playing on one team where he was like the third option, right, to get the ball, to then being on another team and now being the first option. And the moment you score and teams see you scoring, now they're going to double team you. Now they're going to play you harder. And he didn't know how to handle that pressure. He thought he was just going to waltz in there and just be like, yeah, just score the basket. They put it on him, man. They put it on him. And as I'm sitting on the bench as his coach, I'm like, oh man, you know what I mean? Like, how am I going to encourage my son after this? It was a horrible season. I wasn't the head coach, I was the assistant coach, but it was a horrible season. But I had to tell him, just because you have a bad team doesn't mean you have to have a losing mindset. Doesn't mean that you have to lose just because the team didn't win. And I
Yeah,
think,
that's a good point.
you know what I mean? And that's so important to know that,
Huh.
because if you if you don't develop that, he's going to be on this team for 11 games. If those 11 games determine the next 11 years of your life, like, how many people can go back to their childhood or something that happened as the benchmark as to why they never succeed, because they never overcame that. And so when I think of speaking, it's much bigger than just getting on a stage. It's much bigger than delivering your story and a message. It's you building that confidence to that what you say to yourself, because before a message gets out of you, it has to get into you. Like it's got to work through you before it comes out of you. And so I
Yeah.
believe that what we're doing is we're working this message into his life. And rather he does speaking, coaching, whatever he does in life, these lessons are going to be important for him to learn.
Yeah, I agree. And your challenges, the things that you go through grow you. If he's doing these at such a young age, he's going to be able to solve problems and conflicts and challenges quickly when he's older. So I think it's amazing. And any parent listening to this, you definitely need to challenge your child. I mean, I used to be a school teacher and I saw so many parents want to do the things for their children. In reality, that's never how they're going to learn and to grow and to get better in life.
Yeah, for sure.
And I also think it's important too, going back to speaking, knowing that you're impacting the masses. It's not even about you. It's not even about your story. It's about who you can connect with and whose life that you can change. When you have that viewpoint, it ultimately makes it so much more worthwhile. I heard you mention that you work with a lot of clients who are really terrified of speaking. I'm sure you've uncovered specific examples of what's holding them back. Is there a commonality at all that holds people back from being able to express themselves and their story and who they are?
Yeah. I would say the first thing is they've lied to themselves for way too long. Um, Most people don't fear public speaking. I hate to tell you that. That's the biggest lie that I've uncovered. Oh, I have a fear of public speaking. No, you have a fear of people because you can't stop talking. You can't stop posting. You can't stop commenting. You can't stop TikToking. So that's not true, right? And most people, it's not speaking. What it is we're afraid of the criticism and the judgment and the acceptance and the rejection. That's all the stuff that people are afraid of. And so one thing that I do is I get people to call it out and label it. Like, what's your fear? Right? I normally when I do trainings, I get on the board and I write these three letters, WTF. And they say, well, I ask them, what does this mean? Yeah, they'll be like, what the I'm like, no, it's what's the fear? Okay. I want you to call out what's your biggest fear around speaking. And most of them will say, well, my dad never let me talk. Or in my family, I was the youngest and all my siblings, they talked over me. Or there was a teacher, there was a boyfriend, there was some relation, there was something along, and none of that has to do with public speaking. It's wild, right? But so when we start the process, what I try to get people to do is not just to tell their story, but what kind of message they want to deliver, right? People will either want to deliver an idea, a message, or a story. And so the question is, which one of those you want to deliver? And I start to break it down and say, let's focus on why do you want to speak? What do you want to speak on and who do you want to speak to? Let's start there. So I started to come up with that model back in 2000, maybe 2020. And so I wrote an ebook on it called The Three Core Essentials of Speaking with Confidence. And it's on the why, what, and who. And the reason why I wrote that was because people were just making it so complicated. Like, I'm like, what is the most effective way to really, get out there, get your message out there, be effective? And I'm like, well, the first thing you got to do is you got to like, what do you want to speak on? Right. Well, I want to speak on this. And then ask them the question. So why do you want to speak on that? Like, what's the value? What's the purpose? Most people might give you a surface answer, but if you ask them that question continually, they'll go deeper with it. And so I felt like those were the common things that I kept seeing people talk about is that they knew their story, but they didn't know how to deliver a message. They didn't know how to really own it. Like they were trying to memorize it. And I'm like, you're trying to memorize stuff that you already know. So the problem was you weren't connecting the dots. Problem was you weren't creating a storyboard. Problem is that you weren't envisioning it like a movie scene. Like what happened here. And so what happens is that people will like if you ever ask somebody who talks a lot, tell me your story, like get ready for it, right? That's a fire hose, right? Like so I don't tell people tell me your story. I say, what's your message?
Mm,
And the
yeah.
reason why I do that is because they have to concise it. They have to be
Mhm.
shorter with it. Because if you try to tell me your story, you want to go through a in your mind, you think it's a chronological line like this. If you have to tell me what this and then this, and
Mhm.
and here's the thing, we never get to the message because all you did was story tell. And so we try to get people to really clear about what's the value that they're offering, right? Denise Hamilton said this in back in the day, Clubhouse. It was either Clubhouse or it was LinkedIn. We did it like a LinkedIn live. And she said, people don't pay you to hear your story. They pay you to change their story. That's why people pay you.
It's
And
powerful.
think about every business that you've worked with, every client that you work with. They're not paying you to hear your story. They're paying you so that you change their story, their outcome, their results, right? And so I always felt like that's such an important factor for to remember why I'm on this stage. Why did like I deliver every talk like it's my last talk. I always say your next talk should be your best talk. Literally. It's not about how many people are in front of you. If it's an audience of one or if it's an audience of 1,000, it doesn't matter. Like you have to be real, you have to own that. You got to be a beast at it. And you got to love doing it because I always feel the pressure. Sometimes I almost ignore it like to a fault. And I wonder why I'm so full of stress sometimes. But I think like in my mind, I always accept the challenge. I always say yes to it because I know it's only going to produce a better version of me. And if people could see that in themselves, which a lot of people don't, they don't see themselves like that. They don't, the truth is that they don't even, you know how many people don't even like watching their own videos? They don't like hearing their own voice.
Hmm.
So if you don't like it, what makes you think I'm gonna like it? Right?
Exactly.
If you right? What makes you think you're gonna be able to attract and connect with me? So it's so important. I watch my videos all the time. Anytime that I do a talk, I watch it and I'm like, okay, I could have said that better. Oh, I like that point. I never said that before. Oh, I need to double down on that. Let me dig in. Oh, you know what? Or I like to say inventory your stories. I like to have stories like this and saying, okay, what's on the shelf? What do I use for this audience? What do I use for that audience? You know, how can I say that better? Oh, do I have a better story? And it's interesting when you start to connect those, how many stories you have, how many experiences you have that the world doesn't even know about yet. But
I think what you're trying to also say, which I think is a really interesting point, and I want to go ahead and highlight it for our audience, essentially is that it's not something that everybody is born with, right? But public speaking, just like anything else, is a skill and you can go ahead and get better at it. Like you just mentioned, you can watch your videos, you can take a look at how you're presenting, how you're saying certain things and change those things. It's by all means like anything else, like a muscle that you can train. Public speaking is the same.
absolutely, absolutely.
I do want to also highlight a point where you made if you don't like your story, how do you expect your audience to like your story? And if you're not confident in you, how is anyone else going to be confident in what you're saying? And I think that's a really important point because it's just looking in the mirror and you have to love you. You have to know that every story has a point and every point has a story as well when you're sharing. And I've learned from a lot of my mentors, and maybe you can elaborate on this, but you're not telling your chronological story. You're picking one pain point, right? And then you're explaining that. So if you don't mind going more into detail of that.
And I think we all do. I think we all have our own delivery style, right? So for me, when I talk about, so I have this message called Speak More, and I developed that. I was in a season where I was just trying to figure life out. I was in ministry for a long time, and I got burnt out and tired of. I wasn't tired of God. I was tired of church. I love God, right? But I was tired of maybe the way that I felt limited by sometimes institutions, and I felt like there was more to me. And I was having this conversation at an event, and and there was all the thing called Creative Collective, and all these people were like the musicians go here and this person goes here, and all these groups are breaking out into like these like communities. And I'm in this event, and I'm still sitting in the audience by myself. I don't know why. It was like my legs were stuck. Okay. And I literally I prayed. I said, God, what's my creative gift if I don't understand, if I don't connect with any of these? Like I was genuinely having like this like wrestling match with God live on in an audience, right? And I felt like God say, "Well, how did I create?" And I said, "You spoke." And he said, "Speak more." And that's how I developed my program. Speak more. It was it was it was in the height of me feeling like I needed to connect with the highest gift that I felt like I was given as a communicator. And so as I started to harp on those words and to really think about it, Speak More wasn't the guy who was sitting in that audience listening from a stage, something that didn't connect with me. Speak More was the 9-year-old who heard a counselor say, "If you've ever been abused, come and talk to us." And that was me. That was the 9-year-old. The 9-year-old was the one who raised his hand and said, "That happened to me." And I finally told my parents what my offender did to me. That was when Speak More really happened. That's when I knew that there was something powerful in me. Because my offender told me that if I ever told my parents, they would be mad at me. And so I grew up with this fear of trying to impress people and trying to not make people mad or piss them off. And I became a people pleaser and I became somebody who I was never meant to be. And so when we get to that point of telling our story and harbor, I use that story. I open up with that and you should see people's faces when I tell them, "Hey, I've been on this stage," but then I show them the stage of me at 9 years old when I heard that counselor. And I said, "But this was the stage that impacted me the most. Because if it wasn't for this stage, if that woman had not come and said yes to speaking about this, if she decided to take the day off, if I decided to not go to school, what would have happened?" Those are the kind of stories that I want people to know of. Now, it's not about I'm a victim. I don't need people to feel sorry for me. I've gone through my healing and I've gone through my therapy and I've gone through all those things. But every one of us has an origin story. Every one of us has that benchmark where I don't need to, and you don't need to know the details. I don't need to trigger you. I don't need to trauma dump. I don't need to do none of that. Right. I just know where that story fits in my narrative because for me, that was my speak more moment. But for somebody else, what's your moment? What was it? Was it a coach? Was it, what was it? Was it you failing and you never getting back up and someone up? I don't know what that is for you. Was it a failed, you know, uh, pursuit of a career? I don't know what that is for people. But I think when people get to that moment and start to really I like to call it an anchor story, right? Like that helps you from not drifting off into the sea of like forgetfulness. But like, what's that anchor story that you drop that sinks down deep into someone's heart that they will never forget? So that's how I use that. But yeah, it's important to have that. It's important for you to comb through your stories, and that's hard. A lot of us don't want to recall the stuff we've been through. We really don't. Like, no one's like, "Hey, let me tell you my story." You know what I mean? Like, it's hard sometimes to really tell it. Um, I remember one time I told the story. I was speaking at a university, and I think I was too raw, right? And I look back and I was like, "Oh man, I should never say that again." Like, it was the right story with the wrong crowd, and that was something that I took note of. I was like, "Okay, everybody can't get that story that way." Right? There are some people who can, there are some people who can't. So I found ways to tell my story, and like you said, to even what I've heard in the speaking realm as well, what you said as well was never make a point without telling a story, and never tell a story without making a point. Like making sure those two were in alignment. And so I think at this point in my career or my journey, I kind of know what it is and when I don't, right? Like I recently gave a talk that's called From the Other Side of the Stage. And the reason why I gave that was I was like, the most impactful thing that happens on this stage is not what I'm going to say, but what you're listening to. The most impactful thing from this stage, right? And then I share, I was that kid who was sitting in the audience at 9 years old listening to a speaker. And I was able to turn that around. And I mean, it was like a total God moment. It was like, man, there it is. And that's the thing, as a speaker, you consistently have those. I'm constantly having breakthrough aha moments on stage that if I could show you what's going on in me, right? It's wild. It's like, whoa, but I have to know how to take that in and be with that. Like communicators, it's an art form, it's a skill set, it's something you practice, it's something that you embody. But yeah, I think finding that simple story to then launch off, right, off your runway into the air is important.
So much to unpack there, but I wanted to go back to just thank you so much for sharing that with us. I know that it's not easy to talk about. I definitely want to hear if you have a recommendation for, if somebody feels like they have a message, they feel like they have a purpose, but they're afraid to do so because so many people are afraid to share their message. How do they break free from that fear?
Um, I think part of it was finding safe people to first share it with. I think it starts there because if you can't share it with your inner circle, then who do you trust? Right? I'm not going to trust a stranger with my story, right? Until I know how I've worked it out. Um, I think for me, being in having moments of counseling and therapy and having those moments where I had community were big for me. It gave me a space to work out those things in a safe space. And everybody doesn't have that, right? So I think part of it is knowing what part of your story to tell, right? Like what part of it, like 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 how many times have you heard a story and you'd be like, oh, you could have left out those other 30 minutes. You're probably just giving me those 5 minutes there, right? That's important because sometimes what ends up happening is when we're storytelling, it's a journey. So if I'm looking for something, right? And or I'm trying to show you something and I'm taking you through every room in the house and everything, you're gonna get exhausted, like, dude, what are we doing? Like, where are we going? Right. And so it's important to know where you're taking people at on the storyline. Again, it doesn't have to be everything, but it does have to be something. And it's got to be something that you can bookend. It has to have a landing spot. And it's got to be able for somebody to remember and recall. Like you'll remember Speak More now. You'll remember the 9-year old on the stage. You'll remember those things, right? Without me having to go deep into going to the counselor's office and the kids making fun of me after school because they saw me go into that. Like, like you'll be like, oh my God, the guy's traumatized. All of that is not important. Now, if it was, I was talking to kids about being bullied, I would share that part. And so there's different aspects of my story that I could share. That's the power of your stories that you control the narrative, right?
How do you know when you're speaking to your audience? How do you read your audience to say, okay, this is the story that I want to share with them because I know they're going to resonate so deeply?
Yeah. Um, I think finding general ways to talk about things that we all go through is important, right? And I think telling it your way is what makes you unique. And so there's so many parallels towards like maybe that's not something you went through, but maybe you know somebody who went through that, so you can relate, right? Or maybe you heard about it, or you know we all you know we all have experiences in life, and so I think part of it is knowing that as you're sharing your story and as you're delivering your message, that people are going to connect to some part of it, and whatever that part is for you, whatever that piece is for you, that's what's going to help you get through, right? That's what's going to help you connect with people because not everybody is going to connect with your message and your story. They're not going to connect with it. But the truth is that if you're good at scanning the room, this is what I say often to my speakers that I train and coach is you're either the thermostat or the thermometer. Either you're setting the temperature or you're watching it go up and down. And sometimes you have to do both. Sometimes you got to say something that's just wild and be like, let me see how they react. Sometimes you have to realize, okay, and again, as a speaker, I kind of know who my audience is, or I'm there beforehand. I'm watching, I'm looking at the speaker before. What's the vibe? What's the energy? What's the temperature? Who's in the room? And so there are moments like that where I think you have to do your due diligence and read the room. You have to be able to find that person. When I'm on stage, I'm always looking for two people, the one who agrees and the one who disagrees. Okay. Because that right there fuels me. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna convince the living snot out of this person that what I'm saying is true, right? because you have your skeptics, your critics, you have them. You actually need them. They actually drive me to actually get better at doing what I'm doing, right? So for me, it's knowing how to share that, and I find ways that are the most simple and easy. Like they say, if your message has to feel like a fifth grader could sit there and listen to it and be impacted, like literally. Like it's not about being eloquent or over intelligent or super smart or data driven. Though there are platforms for that, but the majority of folk just want to feel like they're connected to you. They want to feel like you're not just speaking to their head, but their heart, right? And so, how do you do that? How do you bring those elements together and give them the best 10-minute talk, 15-minute talk, 20-minute talk, 1 hour talk, whatever that looks like for you? All that is your framework and skeleton is the same. You just add more substance in each one of those areas. That's how I visualize it in my head.
That's really good advice. And so to wrap this up, as you probably know, our podcast is called Light Up Your Life. Can you tell us what you think that means or what it means to you?
Yeah, I think light up your life. I think illumination, shining bright. There's a fire within. There's all those factors that I think bring out the very best in us. And especially in times like this, it can be a very dark world, right? And there's a lot of darkness in the world. And I'm always about illuminating the world. I feel like for me, if it's not lit, I ain't with it. Like so for me, I kind of get the sense that that's your energy, and I could see that just through your energy through this and the questions that you're asking. I think it's great. I love the title actually.
Thank you. It took a long time for us to figure out what we wanted the podcast name to be, but that was really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And finally, just for a little bit of fun, we're going to do a quick this or that challenge. Are you ready?
Sure, let's go for it.
Speak to 10,000 people once or coach 10 people deeply for a year.
Coach 10 people deeply for a year.
I like that. All right. Storytelling or strategy?
Strategy. I
Hmm.
like strategy better. Yeah.
And are you a morning person or a night owl?
Both. That's the problem.
How many hours of sleep did you get?
Listen, I get up at 4:30 a.m. for a 5 a.m. prayer club that I'm a part of. We gather about 100 and something people, business leaders and professionals at 4:30 a.m. It's wild. And I'm so exhausted, but but I
Lots of
love it.
dedication. That's great.
I love it. You know what? And yeah, I'm a morning person, but I'm learning to learn how to shut it down at night. But I love waking up in the fact that there's a reason to get up, that's enough.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so next one is lead with heart or lead with vision?
Can I go 50-50 on that one? But if I had to pick one, I think I'm always gonna lead with heart. I'm always gonna lead with heart. Because vision
Never
sometimes
wrong.
makes you heartless.
Yeah, it's heart is never wrong, right? I agree with
Heart's never wrong.
I
Yeah.
love it. All right. So next, quick impactful message or long detailed keynote.
Quick, impactful message. I've seen people change in from a message or something that I see in them that a keynote can never do.
Mm,
And it's just a simple conversation.
that's great. Okay, next one is travel the world speaking or stay local and build community.
48. So I'm tired of traveling. How about we stay local and build community? I think community is big, and I think you can have as much impact online as you do in person.
Mhm, I
Yeah.
agree with that.
It's where our world is today, right? Community and
100%.
it's online as well. So, and you talked during the podcast a lot about community. So I think that's a no brainer that that was going to be the right fit for you. All
Yeah,
right.
for sure.
Last one. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Success. Is it more about mindset or skill set?
Success is more about mindset. It's all mindset. I think your mindset will keep you where your skill set can take you.
Mm, I've
Oh,
never heard that before, but that's great.
because you can be it's never a skill set issue. We're full of skills. We know how to learn. The problem is, do we know how to unlearn? That's the mindset
Yeah.
part. Do we
Yeah.
know how to unlearn habits, behaviors, patterns, labels, lies, limiting beliefs? All of that is in the mindset. And so I know great skilled people who can't get out of their mind. They're just stuck. They're stuck, and I don't know how long they'll be there. I know I won't be there for too long. So, I think it's always a mindset issue, more than a skill set issue, success.
Yeah, when you go back and you unpack everything that happened to you and your beliefs and everything, it will help rewrite your story and you can change your life by doing that. For any of our audience that wants to connect with you, Benny, where can they find you?
I'm primarily active on LinkedIn, which is under Benny Salas or Benjamin Salas. On Instagram, which is Coach Benny Salas, same thing on Facebook. And then I love Threads as well. I don't know if you guys are on Threads. Threads is
I am,
fire.
yes.
Yeah, I love Threads. I posted something today. I got like 420 likes. You're never getting that on Instagram, right? So
Oh, cool.
sometimes I would say those are the main avenues and platforms that I'm on.
Awesome. We'll definitely link everything in the show notes. And thank you so much for being on the show today. It was amazing. You gave such great advice and you opened up your heart and you shared your story and your message. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And we're sending our listeners so much love and light.